Welcome back to Mad Hatter's Civil War Battle Series, the Battle of Front Royal. The Battle of Front Royal, also known as Guard Hill or Cedarville, was fought on May 23, 1862, in Warren County, Virginia, as part of the Confederate Army Major General Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson's campaign through the Shenandoah Valley during the American Civil War. Front Royal demonstrated Jackson's use of valley topography and mobility to unite his own forces while dividing those of his enemy. At a minimal cost, he forced the withdrawal of a large Union army by striking at its flank and threatening its rear. On May 21, 1862, the Union Army under Major General Nathaniel Banks, numbering about 9,000 men, was concentrated in the vicinity of Strasburg, Virginia, with 2 companies of infantry at Bucktown Depot. Colonel John R. Kenly commanded 1,063 men and 2 guns at Front Royal. Confederate cavalry under Colonel Turner Ashby confronted Banks near the Strasburg, but then withdrew to join the main army, which crossed Massanutten Mountain via New Market Gap to reach Luray, Virginia. On May 22nd, Jackson's Army of the Valley advanced along the muddy Luray Road to within 10 miles of Front Royal. Colonel Thomas T. Mumford's cavalry regiment was sent across to close off Manassas Gap and cut communication between Front Royal and Washington, D.C. On the morning of May 23rd, the vanguard of Jackson's army reached Spangler's Crossroads. Here, the Confederate cavalry, under Colonels Ashby and Thomas L. Flournoy, diverged west across the South Fork of the Shenandoah River at McCoy's Ford. The infantry continued to Ashby's Chapel and right onto a crossroad to reach Goonie Manor Road. Following the road, they approached Front Royal from the south, bypassing Federal pickets stationed near the river on the Luray Road, 1 mile south of the courthouse. After minor skirmishing, the Federals withdrew. Jackson's lead brigade, under the leadership of Brigadier General Richard Taylor, deployed on Prospect Hill and alongside the ridge to the east. The 1st Maryland Infantry, CSA, and Major Robideau Wheat's Louisiana Tigers Battalion were thrown out in advance, entering the town and clearing it of Union skirmishers. The battle is notable in that the 1st Maryland CSA was thrown into battle with their fellow Marylanders, the Union 1st Maryland Regiment, the only time in United States military history that 2 regiments of the same numerical designation and from the same state have engaged each other in battle. Colonel Kenly, in command of Union forces, withdrew his force to Camp Hill, supported by a section of artillery. The Union line extended in an arc from the South Fork to Happy Creek, defending the South Fork Bridge. Kenly's artillery opened fire and slowed the Confederate advance. The Confederate infantry advanced through town, deploying into line of battle under an accurate artillery fire. A Confederate flanking column moved to the east, crossing Happy Creek in an attempt to force a Union withdrawal without a frontal assault. After a long delay because of the muddy roads, a battery of rifled artillery was deployed on or near Prospect Hill to counter the Union guns on Camp Hill. In the meantime, after crossing the South Fork of McCoy's Ford, Ashby and Lieutenant Colonel Flournoy's 6th Virginia Cavalry rode via Bell's Mill and the Waterlick Station to reach the Union outpost at Bucktown Depot. Ashby made a mounted assault which cost him several of his best officers before the Union defenders surrendered. Ashby cut the telegraph lines, severing communication between the main Union army at Strasburg and the detached force at Front Royal. He then divided the cavalry, sending Flournoy's regiment east toward Riverton to threaten Kenly's rear. Ashby remained at Bucktown Depot astride the railroad to prevent reinforcements from being sent to Front Royal. On discovering that Confederate cavalry was approaching from the west, Colonel Kenly abandoned his position on Camp Hill, retreated across the South and North Fork bridges, and attempted to burn them. He positioned part of his command at Guard Hill, while the Confederates ran forward to douse the flames, saving the bridges. While Confederate infantry repaired the bridges for a crossing, Flournoy's cavalry arrived at Riverton and forded the river, pressing Kenly's forces closely. As soon as the Confederate infantry crossed, the Union position could be flanked by a column moving along the river. Kenly chose to continue his withdrawal, his outmatched cavalry fighting a rearguard action against Flournoy's 6th Virginia. Kenly withdrew along the Winchester Turnpike beyond Cedarville, Virginia, with Flournoy's cavalry in close pursuit. Jackson rode ahead with the cavalry as Confederate infantry began to cross the rivers. At the Thomas McKay House, 1 mile north of Cedarville, Kenly turned to make a stand, deploying on the heights on both sides of the pike. Flournoy's cavalry swept around the Union flanks, causing panic. Kenly fell wounded, and the Union defense collapsed. More than 700 Union soldiers threw down their weapons and surrendered. Thanks for watching this episode of Mad Hatter's Civil War History. Like, follow, and click the bell for notifications to ensure you see all the latest content. As always, let me know if there's any other important events of the American Civil War you would like me to address.